concern. So, you can only imagine in New York City, the size of these buildings, the height, the concerns that go in from a fire safety standpoint, and at the time, coming out of COVID, how backed up inspections and various things were to look into these buildings. But what we had been told was that the process by which the building was inspected was expedited at a level that had not really been noticed or seen before, as far as an effort by FDNY or to push certain members of FDNY to get that building open. And so that was something that raised our concerns. So this initial search of his campaign aide is on November 3rd of last year. And then on November 6th, FBI agents actually stopped Adams as he left an event in New York City and took his cell phones and iPad. There's been story after story of subpoenas, of all sorts of various allegations since then. And there's been a number of people in city government that have been questioned. You mentioned a number of city commissioners. We're talking about subpoenas sent to the police commissioner, subpoenas sent to, who has since resigned from that post, the schools chancellor, to a whole host of top city people. And the question really has been, where does this all go? And that still remains a bit of a question even at this hour, and will likely remain in question until charges are made public tomorrow. But I think it's important for people to remember that there really are been six if you count a recent investigation involving the New York City sheriff. That is not believed to be tied to any of what we're talking about here tonight. But you've got 4 or 5 investigations involving New York City Hall, or at least different avenues of investigation. And you've also got the police department investigation. That's not being conducted by the FBI. That's being conducted by federal agents assigned to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And that's looking into something that our colleague Jonathan Dienst, who I'm reporting this with tonight, was the first to report, in that nightclub owners and managers who would face repeated requests for inspection from city officials and from members of the NYPD. That at least one of those owners, who spoke to us on the record and on camera, said he was told to contact somebody in New York City nightlife, who said, you can make these problems go away effectively by contacting the brother of then Police Commissioner Edward Caban. And the question for investigators is whether or not there was a pay-to-play or some sort of a shakedown that occurred there. It's important to note, none of the people that I'm mentioning here have been charged at all. Most of them that we've been able to speak to through their attorneys have denied any sort of wrongdoing. And tonight, the mayor himself issuing a statement saying, quote, "I always knew that if I stood my ground for New Yorkers, that I would be a target, and the target I became. If I am charged, I am innocent, and I will fight this with every ounce of my strength and spirit." And that really echoes comments from him as this investigation is heated up over the past several weeks, and a number of these law enforcement actions have become public. So what tomorrow exactly looks like, a little bit unclear, but we are reporting that the mayor of the city of New York is expected to face federal charges tomorrow. And that's something that, if you're sitting in North Dakota right now, if you're sitting in Arizona and you're wondering, well, why do I really care? When you consider how important, and we're seeing it with the United Nations General Assembly this week, how important New York City is to the global economy, to the country's economy, and the amount of money that New York City gets in federal aid for a lot of things that New York City provides to the rest of the country, it is something that does impact much farther than just the 5 boroughs of the city. So that's as best we have it at this hour, and obviously it's a good thing NBC doesn't pay the same phone bills that they would have 20 years ago, because we'd be out panhandling in the street. We're going to continue to light up the phones.
Tom, there's another national echo to this, which comes from the way Donald Trump frames what he calls the political prosecutions against him by the Justice Department, which he always will refer to as the Biden Justice Department, a Justice Department of a democratically controlled administration with a democratically appointed Attorney General, Merrick Garland. This is the same Justice Department now that has indicted the Democratic mayor of New York City, thereby creating a political crisis in New York City where If the mayor does not resign, the power to remove him from office belongs to the governor of New York, the Democratic governor of New York, Kathy Hochul. The calls for the mayor to resign began before his indictment, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez being the very first member of Congress to call for his resignation, doing that just on the amount of investigations that were swirling around the mayor already. The mayor has two of the most important constituents in the federal government. The Democratic leader of the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries, is a resident of New York City, a constituent of the mayor's, and the Senate Democratic Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is a constituent of the mayor's, a resident of New York City. They will be under inordinate political pressure to declare themselves on the mayor's future. Should he resign? Should the governor remove him from office? These are political questions on top of this criminal investigation that is now moving rapidly against the mayor. And Tom, what can we expect procedurally tomorrow?
Well, I think that remains a bit of a question. I think, is this something where a number of things can happen? I mean, first off, there's no indication here at all that there's any sort of violent crime that's been committed. So typically when we see a violent crime, where we see the idea of potential witness tampering or intimidation, or we see crimes that involve some sort of trafficking, typically this is not something that's splashed across the pages of websites and cable news at 10:08 at night. It's typically the type of thing where all of a sudden we come on here because somebody's been arrested and they were woken up in the early morning by federal agents at their house. So the circumstances of this, because it's more white-collar in nature, will likely be that at some point the mayor will have to turn himself in. Others might have to turn themselves in if anybody else is in fact charged. We don't have any information on that. And so I think that's all kind of, at the moment, a little bit up in the air as far as what this looks like and where it goes from here. But typically, these types of crimes, and we've seen it in the charging of Senator Menendez. Nobody grabbed him out of his house at 5 in the morning. He was allowed to surrender. So that's typically what happens in these type of white-collar cases, and I think we're just going to have to see how all this plays out. But should the charges be unsealed tomorrow, should the charges be made public, whatever form that takes, we'll at least have a lot more information, I think, to the point that you were making before, which is there's all these different investigative avenues. Which one are we walking down here, or are we walking down them all? It's just a question I can't answer at this hour.
NBC News national law and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter, thank you very much for joining us in this live extended coverage of what is now the historic indictment of the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams. Joining our discussion now is Andrew Weissmann, former FBI General Counsel and former chief of the criminal division in the Eastern District of New York. That includes New York City, Brooklyn. Here is, he's an MSNBC legal analyst. Also with us, Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent. Andrew, your reaction to what seems to have been where the news momentum was going in the last few weeks in New York City, as more and more officials in the Adams administration were either resigning or handing over their phones to the FBI and then being forced to resign.
Yeah, a few observations. First, to your point about this being a sitting mayor, some of our viewers may be noticing that there's a sitting mayor who has now been reported to have been indicted. There was a sitting senator in New Jersey, Senator Menendez, who was indicted. But you cannot, under Department of Justice policy, indict a sitting president, as I know well from the Mueller investigation. And so that is the reason that you are seeing a sitting politician under indictment by the Department of Justice, but at a lower level than the presidency, which may strike some people as an odd internal Department of Justice policy. The second thing to note is that Eric Adams, his history is before he was mayor, he was quite senior in the New York City Police Department. And so, like Donald Trump, as somebody who was in charge of law enforcement, who now will be facing charges by the U.S. Attorney's Office, reportedly in the Southern District of New York. And then finally, what I'm looking for, I think in any case like this, the real thing that I will be looking for if the charges are unsealed tomorrow, which I suspect they will be, is how is the government going to prove intent? This seems to be all of the investigations basically deal with some form of campaign finance violations, whether the money is coming from overseas or not, whether they're quid pro quos. But it would be illegal to have foreign campaign funds go into your coffers. But you need to show that Eric Adams, the mayor, knew that he was aware. And so I suspect that we will learn that some of the people whose homes have been subject to searches, whose phones have been taken, are actually cooperating with the U.S. Attorney's Office, because that's a way into the head of the mens rea, the intent, much as our viewers saw Michael Cohen being able to testify about Donald Trump's mens rea, what he was saying and doing. So that's the thing I'm going to be looking for tomorrow, is how is the government intending to prove that Eric Adams was aware of the alleged wrongdoing.
Let's listen to what Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said today before the mayor was indicted.
We are seeing just such a steady stream from deputy mayors and so many others that are either vacating, resigning, or frankly leaving the city rudderless in terms of leadership. And so right now, I think this is squarely about Mayor Adams' ability to govern New York City and for the New York City governance to be fully staffed to serve the people of New York City. And frankly, under this constant stream of scandal, I do not know if the city will be able to even name replacements for all of these resignations and vacancies at this point. I think for the best of the city and so that we can continue to staff the administration of the city, it would be best for Mayor Adams to stay.
Lisa Rubin, feel free, despite my question, which will be specific, to comment on any aspect of this breaking news as you see it right now. But I've become suddenly interested in the line of succession in City Hall and what happens if the mayor resigns or if the governor uses her power, unique power, to remove him.
Well, let's start with what happens if the mayor were to resign, because Lawrence, as this investigation has picked up steam, you'll be unsurprised to learn that I and others have picked up the city charter, which lays out exactly that, a plan of succession. If Mayor Adams is either removed from office or he resigns from office, for a period of time, the mayoralty of the city of New York would go to the current sitting public advocate, Jumaane Williams, who is a former city council member and quite progressive as compared with Mayor Adams, who has always positioned himself as sort of a law and order Democrat, the sort of Democrat you don't much see anymore elected to national or high-profile office in major cities. That having been said, Jumaane Williams would be a temporary custodian of the office because the city charter also provides, depending on when that resignation comes, that a special election would then occur. In this case, if Mayor Adams were to resign now at this point in the year, in his third year of office, but after September 20th, which is a critical date under that city charter, Jumaane Williams would have to call a special election roughly 60 days after that resignation, or if that comes too close in time to the November election, the first Tuesday in December, I believe. But Mayor Adams is showing no signs that he wants to resign. In fact, in response to that clip that you showed from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, both Mayor Adams and his spokesperson issued statements very defiantly saying that no charges had yet been filed, that it was inappropriate for her